When Grey Zone Warfare released on April 30th, 2024, everyone was asking the question, is Grey Zone Warfare the Tarkov killer? Would Grey Zone finally be the game to steal the player base away from Tarkov? Well, no. Grey Zone did not kill Tarkov, but it did replace it, for me at least. Escape from Tarkov released to a closed alpha in August of 2016 and later to a beta in July of 2017. I started playing Tarkov in 2017 with a standard edition of the game and loved it so much that I upgraded to the Edge of Darkness edition a few months later. The world of Tarkov was like no other game I had played. The adrenaline rush you'd get from killing another player and stealing their loot for yourself, the stress of having a rare item like a LEDX or keycard on you and trying to avoid fights as you hide and crawl your way to the extract, or just trying to survive with a few bullets, broken armor, and a stack of crackers. The hardcore first-person shooter survival experience that Tarkov delivers has super high highs, but also really low lows. Tarkov has a ton of great features that make it stand out from other games. Raids where you never know what will happen, lots of quests, tons of gear and loot that you can sell or trade, in-depth weapon customization, various ammo types, a punishing death system where you lose everything on you, a complex medical system, challenging AI, intense gunfights, and a survival system that makes you question, is food more important than bullets right now? Tarkov has all of these things, but Grey Zone Warfare has them too, and Grey Zone does them better. Why? Why has Grey Zone Warfare replaced Tarkov? These are just my opinions on what I think Grey Zone Warfare is doing better or different, and why it has become a replacement for Escape from Tarkov. First off, Tarkov stopped being fun. Each year, hackers have become more of a problem, and when you keep getting wiped out by a hacker raid after raid and losing all that gear you spent days grinding for is completely demoralizing. Hackers, along with server issues, desync problems, long queue times, audio issues, these problems have been in the game since I first started playing, and they still haven't been fixed, and it has really taken the fun out of the game. Also, the glacial speed and quality of updates. Waiting years for a new map to come out, and when it finally does, it's unplayable due to poor optimization. Reserve and Lighthouse, for example. Both were laggy and had stutters so bad that you couldn't play on them and had to stick to older maps, even though you wanted to explore the new content that was released. All of these things have added to the frustration and took away from the fun that Tarkov was supposed to be. Now, I can hear the complaints already. Grey Zone isn't optimized either and has way less content than Tarkov does. Yes, you are correct. But Tarkov has been in development for more than a decade, and Grey Zone just released into early access a few months ago. Grey Zone has been putting out hot fixes and patches to fix the foundation of the game first, instead of adding more buggy content just to appease the group of people complaining the loudest that they want new stuff. Simply put, Tarkov hasn't been fun anymore, and I have enjoyed my time with Grey Zone Warfare way more in the last few months than I've had with Tarkov in years. If you're a new player to Grey Zone, it's very simple to jump in and start playing. The map has a starter town that you go to for all of your early game quests, and it even gives you the exact coordinates for the first mission. The starting gear and weapons that you can buy from the traders can handle all the missions early on, with more unlocking as you level up. Grab some gear, hop on a little bird, and away you go. You can start fighting the AI and completing quests, and get a good feel for the game before moving out to other areas of the map where you'll encounter harder, more armored enemies and other players. The quests are fun and not difficult to understand, unlike Tarkov. Almost every quest in Tarkov you'll have to look up a guide on how to complete it, and it pulls you out of the lore of the world. With Grey Zone, there are only two things you might have to look up. First is how to mod your weapon. If you're not familiar with firearms, it can be a bit complex with all the different parts and not knowing what can go where. Luckily, if you click on the weapon that you want to mod in your locker, it will highlight all the parts that can go on that weapon, and you can play around with them a bit to build a gun how you want. The second is the medical system. This is the only tutorial that I had to look up, but even then, it wasn't required. Bandages and tourniquets stop bleeding, painkillers stop pain effects, and a surgery kit fixes organs that are damaged. The medical system is complex, but not complicated. It offers enough depth without being confusing and can be learned very fast. Tarkov, on the other hand, before you even load into a game, you need to spend hours looking up tutorials and studying the various maps. When you play Tarkov, a second monitor is almost a must-have. You need to look up a map guide for each map you want to play. You have to learn where all the spawns are so that you know where to start and where the other players start, because they are most likely running to your position to kill you. You need to learn where the extracts are, or else the whole raid is for nothing if you can't figure out how to leave. You need to learn what areas have loot, where the bosses spawn, and what areas are going to be hotter for PvP. When you first spawn in, you feel completely lost, unless you have a copy of the map up on a second monitor. You also need to have an ammo chart open so you know if the bullets you find, or are using, can even penetrate armor, since there are almost 100 different types of ammo in the game, and ammo is more important than the gun you're using. Next, you need to open up 3 charts for the items in the game. First is for what items you need to upgrade your hideout. Second is for what items you need to turn in for quests, and third is for what items are rare and provide the most value. Oh, and a fourth chart for what items you need for crafting. Tarkov has a huge loot pool of items, and it's a daunting task to know what to keep and what can be used. The stash that you're given will be filled with more random items that you'll need for later quests than guns and armor. Speaking of armor, you'll need a guide for that too. Guns and gun parts, better pull up a guide so you know what parts you find will be needed for weapon modding quests, as you can't just buy what you need from the traders. Quests, almost every quest you will need a guide for. Medical system, look up a guide. What traders will pay more for different items? Look up a guide. Insurance for items, look up a guide. Repairing weapons and armor? Better look up a guide. With Tarkov, almost every element of the game needs to be looked up in a guide, because it's so overwhelming you'll be lost without it, and constantly looking up guides instead of playing a game is not my idea of a good time. Gray Zone has a persistent world compared to Tarkov's raid timer. That means the world is constantly living even when you're back at base. You can talk to other members of your faction and coordinate attacks, or help each other out by sharing gear and going on missions together. The world feels alive, and you can take it at your own pace. Want to run in guns blazing? Go ahead. Want to approach slow and recon the area first before moving in? Go ahead. With no raid timer, you feel more in control of how you want to approach each situation. With Tarkov and the raid timer, if you don't get killed by a player in the first 30 seconds, you still feel rushed. With the timer looming over you, it's pushing you towards faster gameplay. One of the selling points that Tarkov had talked about was the open world, where all the maps would be connected and you could go at your own pace with no timer. But that idea has since been scrapped. If you read the Tarkov books, the world feels like a ghost town, with glimpses of scavs and PMCs trying to survive as they kill each other for a piece of better gear. That's the world I want to play in, not one dictated by a stupid timer and fixed spawn points. Tarkov's maps are very well designed with lots of detail and points of interest, but the maps are focused towards PvP and pushing players into choke points. Over time, the maps have been updated, but all the main areas are too close together and it causes a lot of congestion. If you love the constant PvP fights, then Tarkov is for you. With Gray Zone's map, with the main areas being spread out, you can approach an objective any way you like instead of being forced to because of where you spawned. Gray Zone Warfare is more suited for playing with friends. Let me explain by giving an example. You go out on a mission, and 2 minutes after you land, your buddy gets sniped in the head and is dead. You hold the area and push the enemy force back, and your bud has already respawned at the base and is on his way back to the fight in the Little Bird. Or maybe he goes down into a coma, and you do some surgery on him to get him back to his feet. You complete your mission, you head back to base. Or maybe you take a chopper to another area for a different mission. Now you're playing Tarkov. 2 minutes in, your buddy dies and loses all his gear. He goes back to the main menu, he puts together a new loadout, and he sits and waits 30 to 40 minutes for you to make it to an extract. Once he's back, he looks up a guide to see what items he can keep and what he can sell. He repacks his mags, repairs his armor, grabs some food, and maybe 15 to 20 minutes later, he's ready to go back in. You just spent almost an hour sitting and doing nothing while waiting for your friend to finish. Next raid, same thing happens. Not a lot of fun sitting and waiting till you can play again. And yes, you could do a scav raid to pass some time, but if your friend dies and wants to do a scav raid next, then you can't, and you're still waiting. If you're playing Tarkov by yourself, this isn't a problem. When playing Gray Zone, you can still lose all your gear, but you're never just sitting and waiting around for someone else to finish a mission. You actually get to keep playing the game that you paid for. With Tarkov's quest rewards, you can get cash, gear, weapons, and useful items, but the amount you get is severely lacking. You grind out these tasks, some extremely difficult, and the payout is just meh. Most of the time, you will have found better gear, and anything you receive as a reward will just get sold back to the trader for a few extra rubles. The reward you get in Gray Zone are actually worth your time. Medical supplies, gear, weapons that come fully modded out, and enough cash to cover your loadout in case you died on that mission. The rewards you get are worth using. I also want to mention that with the 150 quests in Gray Zone Warfare, none of them involve you killing another player. And that leads me to my next point. With all of the topics I've listed so far, Gray Zone Warfare is more friendly to casual players. A simple learning curve, open map, good quest rewards all add up to being player friendly. If you want PvP battles, Gray Zone Warfare has them too, but you get to choose if it's something you want to do. With great map design, you can avoid PvP fights or dive into them head first. Or, if the PvP battles start becoming too frustrating, then you can switch to the PvE mode. There are times I just want to get some quests done and have fun exploring the new location without the worry of someone hiding in the bush waiting to get the drop on me. Gray Zone gives you the choice of how you want to play. I know Tarkov finally added a PvE mode, but it's only a tacked on afterthought. You still have to connect to a server if you want to play with friends, and there are still raid timers that have been shortened. It's a PvE mode. Raid timers shouldn't exist at all. Tarkov is leaning towards hardcore players who can put in thousands of hours, while Gray Zone gives you a choice. Join the PvP servers and go hunt down fights, or join the PvE only servers and have a more relaxed experience. Gray Zone caters to both hardcore and casual players, and being a casual player myself, I love Gray Zone for the versatility. The player base in Tarkov has a shoot-on-sight mentality, even though you're supposed to be on one of two factions. I have never seen a group of bears or USECs join together to complete a raid. Everyone is just in it for themselves, and the factions are practically useless. In Gray Zone, you actually feel like part of a team. People at the base sharing weapons and gear, discussing hot zones where PvP is taking place, coordinating missions. It's just also dynamic, and I love that aspect of the game. Now, in Tarkov, you can team up with other players in the menu before going into a raid, but 9 times out of 10, they just shoot you in the back and steal your gear. The system exists to play with random players, but in reality, it just doesn't work. In Gray Zone, even interactions with the enemy players on a different faction are amazing. It's not always shoot first. There have been several times when an enemy player has been begging me not to shoot because they need help with a quest, and you end up teaming up with them to get it done, or asking if they managed to find a key for a mission. Because there is no real benefit from killing other players besides the gear they have, you get unexpected moments of cooperation that you just never see in Tarkov. Tarkov has wipes about every 6 months, and Gray Zone is aiming to do the same. The difference between them, though, is how difficult the early game is. With Tarkov, it's a long grind through and through. You're stuck with shit gear, weapons, and ammo, and every raid is a struggle until you hit a high enough level to unlock the flea market. Then it turns into who has the most money to just buy whatever they want instead of scavenging for it. Gray Zone hasn't wiped yet, but the quests you do and the rewards you receive in the early game, you always feel like you're making good progress in your playthrough. If you want to mod an M4 and grab some decent ammo and head out into the world, you can do it with ease. In Tarkov, to mod an M4 with manageable recoil, you'll have to play for hours just to unlock basic mods, and even then, the recoil won't be close to acceptable. I know lots of people enjoy the early game combat in Tarkov, when everyone is at a low level, but when you barely make it to level 15 each wipe, that constant loop of the early game grind over and over again really sucks, and you never get to experience the full game that Tarkov has to offer. The early gameplay in Gray Zone is formatted in a better way so that when you've done it several times, you're not going to be frustrated by it. In Gray Zone, I would consider doing a hardcore playthrough just for fun, but that's not something I would ever do in Tarkov. As much as I've been ripping a Tarkov apart, I've still had lots of fun playing it over the years, and Gray Zone isn't perfect either. Gray Zone in its current state is only about 20% complete, and has a long way to go, with lots of problems that need to get fixed. The biggest problem affecting Gray Zone is the optimization and server issues. that are causing stuttering, rubber banding, and gunshots not to register properly, to the point where players with lower-end PCs aren't even able to play the game. Before you say, well, Tarkov has way better optimization, we need to keep in mind that in Tarkov's early days, it also suffered from similar issues. The team at Madfinger Games is working hard to fix these issues with regular hotfixes and patches. Luckily, I've been able to play Greyzone with very minor issues to performance. I'm running a 4070 Super, and my buddy has a 30 series, and both of us haven't experienced any game-breaking performance issues. A few things I would like to see added to Greyzone is a queue system for the helicopters. Constantly checking the map, waiting for a heli to be available, only to have someone else call it in a half a second sooner is frustrating. If no helis are available, your squads just go on a queue list, and if you're still alive when one is ready, it will automatically come out to you. That way, you can be on the lookout for enemies instead of looking at your map. The AI also needs some work. Getting headshot 8 times in a row through the bushes is a little too accurate for jungle thugs with AKs. They also need to react more to being shot at, such as diving for cover instead of standing in the open or to immediately trying to push your position. I would also love some kind of warning system when the AI are respawning in the area. After clearing out an area and walking around picking up loot, it really sucks to be instantly surrounded by a dozen freshly spawned AI giving you no chance of survival as you get cut to pieces from all sides. I would suggest an audio cue of a truck engine pulling up as if they are dropping off some more troops in that area. That way, it fits into the immersion of the world and gives players a chance to flee or prepare for the next fight. Spawn rates for quest keys needs to be increased, especially when it's just a room for a quest that doesn't even have any loot in it. It's definitely frustrating being stuck on a quest just because you can't get the right key to spawn. Some of the audio needs to be reworked, such as gunshots in the distance and the sound water makes when entering or exiting. Some low objects, such as certain fence types, can't be vaulted over. The scope zoom switch speed also needs to be greatly increased, and the weapon preset system would be a nice quality of life feature. There are other small things that can be tweaked and fixed, such as the helicopter pilot not holding the collective while he's flying, but these are minor things that can be easily fixed over time. Tarkov has cornered the market in the extraction shooter genre for a long time. It's still a great game, and there's lots of fun to be had, even with the flaws that I've listed. Tarkov is more focused towards a hardcore PvP shooter, and there's nothing wrong with that. Tarkov will never be killed off by another game, because it offers a unique experience that is tough to replicate. Right now, as a casual player with a few buds, Greyzone Warfare is just more of what I want out of a video game. Even though Greyzone has only been out for a few months, the potential that it has is huge, and I'm very excited to see what it will bring in future updates. The persistent world, easy learning curve, a coma system that doesn't have you waiting on a menu screen, a complex but easy to use medical system, intense gunfights, great team play in both PvP and PvE servers, a survival system that balances hunger and hydration so that it's needed but not a nuisance, and finally an amazing map with beautiful graphics. That's why Greyzone Warfare has replaced Escape from Tarkov. For me at least. It's fine, I didn't want to sit on your side anyway, you stinky over there.
No, you're stinky.